aggression, people who hurt people, people they don't know, and even those they love or are supposed to love. There is now no disregard for others, even for human life. Why is this happening? And what can you and I do about it? My two guests, who you'll meet in a minute, will examine these vexing situations and offer solutions. Also in this program, breast cancer is a problem for women all over the world. You'll be meeting the head of an organization that provides no-cost medication and treatment to patients in the Caribbean island of Jamaica who have early-stage breast cancer. But we begin with a discussion of this aggression that's hurting too many people, even killing some. You'll also hear about available treatments. Let's welcome my guest, Hannah Pennington, who is Deputy Commissioner for Policy and Training at the Mayor's Office to End the Domestic and Gender-Based Violence Program, and Reverend James Thornton from Salem Baptist Church in Brooklyn. Welcome to Brooklyn 45.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me.
Let me begin with you, Ms. Pennington. Explain this domestic and gender-based violence program.
Thanks. It's so nice to be here. It's always a wonderful opportunity to speak to your viewers and to communities throughout New York City on this really important topic. As you said, I work at an office within Mayor de Blasio's administration that focuses specifically on the issues of domestic and gender-based violence. And if you can believe it, our office has actually been around for almost 20 years this year. It used to be an office exclusively focused on domestic violence, and we've expanded our scope in recent time. And really what we're talking about is violence that occurs between people in intimate relationships, but we also mean family violence. It could be harm that's being caused by one family member to another. It could be, it's pretty vast. It could be harm that's being perpetrated on a student by another student in a high school, for example, sexual harassment, sexual violence. It's very broad, our mandate, and what we do is, and what we are mandated to do through the city charter is to really think about how can we improve how we are providing supports for people who are experiencing this kind of harm and this kind of violence, but also what kinds of work can we do to prevent it in the first place, and even what kinds of supports and programming can we provide to people who may be causing harm in their relationships or are afraid that they might.
A question many people ask: when you hurt people you love, are they the intended target?
That's a really good question, Sam. I think it's interesting that you say it that way, because we do often try to make sure that we make a distinction between what you may hear as work to manage people's anger, for example. And that is something that you may see somebody acting the same way in a workplace or in a store or with their family. There is a difference between that and what we're talking about. And really, and this is like a 3-hour training that one of my teams provides. So this, I'm going to break it down in simplistic terms, but really it's what we like to focus on is that it's one person in an intimate relationship or familiar relationship that's using power and control over the other person. And that can take many different forms. That could take forms that some of us may be familiar with from movies or newspaper articles. That's physical violence. And as you said, it sometimes can escalate to very serious physical harm or even death. But it can also look different than that. It can be more emotional. It can be creating, using threats to control a person's life. It can be stalking. And a very simplistic way of saying it, but something that I've used before in talking to people and educating people, is thinking about one person is making another person's life smaller. So you do know, and I'm sure, because we all are impacted by this. We all see unhealthy relationships where one person perhaps is isolating the other person or controlling their actions or keeping them from seeing their family. It can take on many different forms, but what our focus is making sure that we, from the very beginning, tried to even prevent it by supporting healthier relationships that can then, to avoid unhealthy relationships that can turn abusive.
Reverend James Thornton, let me ask you a question. What can the church do about this?
Well, I think one of the things that I realize sometimes is that people are not empathetic. They're not able to walk into the other person's shoes, so they can't really identify with their pain. And so what we attempt to do at the church is to help everyone to be aware that everybody is a person of value, and to see God's humanity in everyone, because everyone that God breathed into is a divine being that should be treated with respect. And I think as people come to understand that and have that sense of consciousness, their behavior shifts.
I know that I want to talk, and let's do that. The initiative Interrupting Violence at Home. Deputy Commissioner, would you tell us about that initiative?
Sure. I'm so glad to talk about it. It's something that has been a part of my work at the mayor's office that I'm really very proud of myself and the many others who've been working on it. Interrupting Violence at Home is actually an initiative. We have great gratitude to First Lady Erole McClean for lifting up our efforts to think a little more broadly about the ways that we respond to domestic and gender-based violence. And that includes thinking about a really important part of the equation, which is what are we doing to engage people who are causing harm or are afraid that they may cause harm. And that's work that you may have heard before called Batterers intervention programs. And they're often tied to, and they still exist, and they're important work that happens with people who may actually be arrested and being processed through the criminal justice system. And at the beginning of this administration, we made a concerted effort to bring together a lot of different stakeholders to think about how could we improve that work that we're doing with people who have caused harm. And many of us came together and thought about the fact that oftentimes the people who are hurting people have been hurt themselves. So we wanted to continue to center accountability and important responses to survivors, but also recognize that we need to create those spaces for accountability while also understanding actually something that you said, Reverend Thornton, about people's humanity, like understanding that we need to see what's happened in that person's life and how we can help shift their perspective by seeing the harm that they may have caused, they may have experienced themselves, while also listening to survivors and to people who have been have been harmed. And I have to say that a lot of the work really came from hearing from survivors who said, we want to expand how we think about how we respond to this. And we want to create spaces where people can reach out for help if they've caused harm. And so that's the real crux of the program, Interrupting Violence at Home. And there are a number of different components to it. There's one particular piece of it, which was through almost a 1.5 year long process that we went through with a researcher who worked with us and different consultants, and listening to survivors and people who've been through Batterers intervention programs, was to think about how we could create a space for people who choose to go into a space to think about and talk about the harm that they've caused, which is not how we used to approach the work. And like I said, there are existing programs that are what we would call mandated, and something that's launching soon that we've been working on, the design and the preparation for, is called Respect and Responsibility. And it's a program that's going to be available to adults in New York City who choose themselves, and they could be referred by their partner, they could be referred by their pastor, they could be referred through a different city program, but they aren't being directed to do it. They're not being mandated to do it, but they're choosing to go there and to sit with others and to think about the things that have happened in their lives and the actions that they have taken, and to really try to shift their own behavior to both properly hold themselves accountable, but also to think about how they can change their behavior in the future.
Reverend Thornton, is this intimate partner violence obvious in the church? Do people come to you as a pastor for advice? How do you respond to this intimate partner violence, which I'm sure you hear about?
Well, certainly it is something that does happen in the church. One would be surprised. I mean, you even have sometimes even pastors themselves who could be persons that in fact are involved in a kind of intimate violence towards their loved one. And there could be a number of reasons for this. Sometimes it's a great self-dislike the person has for themselves. It can be a sense of low self-esteem. And in these instances, number one, I try to let people know that it's okay to have a safe space and to speak truthfully about what is happening. And then perhaps to refer them to other programs. You know, I've referred people to centers for battered women to let ladies know that it's okay, because you need to be in a safe space. You know, there is the argument sometimes that God hates divorce, and certainly he does. And sometimes a very powerful person who is using a lot of religious language will make one feel guilty for leaving a relationship that's unsafe and simply try to use the word as the weapon to hold that individual together. And my argument always is going to John 10:10. Jesus said, I came that you might have life and you might have it more abundantly. And if you've been abused and mistreated and talked down to, then you're not living an abundant life. And it is my desire for people to be free and to live their best life. And I make every effort to direct people in that regard.
Commissioner Pennington and Reverend Thornton, I also want you to jump into this one as well. How has COVID contributed to this abuse?
It's a really good question. You know, we had to shift all of our programming in record time to be able to make sure that New Yorkers still knew that help was available. And I hadn't yet mentioned, so I'm glad you brought it up, that we at the mayor's office run 5 New York City family justice centers, which are one-stop shops in each of the boroughs that provide comprehensive free services to survivors and their families. And actually it's a great resource for people, for faith leaders to know about, so that when because often I know people do disclose these things to their religious mentors and their pastors, that they know that that service is available. But in a moment's time, we needed to shift those services to remote services, which we did. And I guess in our short time together, I would tell you that it was very heartening to know that people were still reaching out. And honestly, the community of stakeholders and the providers in the city did an amazing job of still doing as much as they could under very difficult circumstances. And for some people, being able to have remote services made it more accessible because of young kids they have at home or because of mental health challenges they had. But that being said, we know that it also created a lot of challenges and barriers because of different lockdown measures that were happening. And we, you know, again, I'm proud of the fact that so many of our vast network of providers came together and were able to still be there for folks. And the domestic violence shelters in our city stayed open the entire time and help was available, but it was a very challenging time. And it continues to be. We just reopened our family justice centers within the last several weeks, and we're getting up to speed. But I think we're learning that we will probably continue, like so many of us, and here we are on Zoom together tonight, we'll continue to use in-person options as well as remote options to create even more accessibility to people who are experiencing violence.
Commissioner Pennington, I know that we need to have you back to discuss this some more. And we also want to have Reverend Thornton back to discuss this some more. We are running out of time. Reverend Thornton, the last word is going to be from you. You've got 30 seconds. What is the one question you'd like to ask Commissioner Pennington?
Well, I think it's a wonderful resource, and I'd love to have our information, because I think what the church needs to do, and we have a health and counseling service in our church. So as a pastor, I don't attempt to do everything. I have retired certified social worker and nurses and teachers that help. And we also look for resources to refer people to that can handle situations that I, as a pastor, cannot professionally handle. And so I applaud you for the work that you do, because this whole idea of emotional and mental health is so extremely important. And as I say to people, you know, if you have a toothache, you go to the dentist. Your foot hurt, you go to a podiatrist. And so if you have an emotional issue, you need to seek the proper resources that can help you to meet those needs.
Commissioner Pennington, where can we have access to the information that you talked about?
I'm so glad you asked, and I forgot to tell you right off the top of, I should have said at the top of the deck. So we have a web-based portal called NYC Hope that is a wonderful comprehensive resource online where people can learn about the things we're talking about here tonight to understand what we mean when we say domestic and gender-based violence, but also you can find all the contact information about the 5 family justice centers, and also our domestic violence hotline, which is a 24-hour hotline. And it's all in one place now, which is definitely an improvement. NYC Hope. And it's the first thing when if all of your viewers Google it, you'll find us there. Okay.
Deputy Commissioner Hannah Pennington, who is the Deputy Commissioner for Policy and Training of the Mayor's Office, that long-term we talked about domestic and gender-based violence program, and Reverend James Thornton from Salem Baptist Church in Brooklyn. We want to thank you both for being on the program. We are going to have you back, but thank you very much for being on Brooklyn 45.
Thanks for having me. Have a great night.
Thank you for having me.
Breast cancer is a problem for women all over the world. My 2 guests to discuss this are from Healing Hands Worldwide, Karen Nelson-Hughes, the Executive Director, and Dr. Erole McClean, who is the founder of that organization. Welcome to Brooklyn 45.
Thank you so much.
Dr. McClean, tell me about this problem in Jamaica.
So breast cancer, as you just mentioned, is the most common cancer in women worldwide, and that is no exception when it comes to Jamaica. So a lot of women in Jamaica are suffering from breast cancer, and the issue there is most of those women are either uninsured or underinsured. And as a result of that, right, these are things that we tend to take for granted, actually, living in the United States or the United States territories. Right, most people are insured, but in Jamaica, most women, or most people in general, are either uninsured or underinsured. So a woman who gets diagnosed with breast cancer is not only having to deal with just the shock and the trauma that comes with being diagnosed with cancer, but also the financial challenges of then being able to find the resources to pay for her care and for her treatment.
Karen, you spoke, when we spoke by email, that is, we talked about this one patient at a time. Can you explain that?
Exactly. You know, we have 2 main projects that come through the doors of Healing Hands Worldwide, 1 student at a time, but 1 woman or 1 patient at a time really is our guiding light as far as our projects are concerned. As mentioned, our founder, Dr. Mclean, is an oncologist, and as such, her passion is really impacting patients with cancer and breast cancer in particular. You know, it's no secret that the Caribbean region struggles with healthcare in general. And as a result, there are simply women who go untreated. And this is a direct correlation to the death rate that we see that is well documented in the Caribbean region and in Jamaica in particular, specifically with breast cancer. And at Healing Hands Worldwide, we really just wanted to make sure that whatever small difference we could make to impact and to support women who are struggling or who just need a fighting chance, we wanted to take that leap and make sure that we made some meaningful impact in that area.
The Jamaica Cancer Society said that 1 in 21 women in Jamaica would be diagnosed with breast cancer. How do you program your operations to deal with this fact that is a fact that is not one that we want to hear about?
Right, and that is correct. And, you know, we won't be able to reach every single woman, but at the same time, if we can somehow reach out to those women who are diagnosed, we're actually focusing on women with early stage breast cancer that is curable. And as an oncologist, right, I treat women like this all the time. And the regimen usually is given, it's a chemotherapy regimen that's given over a few months, but the cost sometimes can be so prohibitive. So we're really just trying to focus on those women who are diagnosed with breast cancer that is still curable. And we are actually starting with just one location and one oncologist who is on the ground there in Jamaica. So we've partnered with this oncologist. Her name is Dr. Sheree Warchin, and she works at the University of the West Indies Hospital there in the cancer clinic. And so we've been working along with her, trying to get medications to Jamaica so that these women who cannot afford it can be treated for free.
Are you working with other organizations in the Caribbean?
So this is a relatively new organization that we have started, and given I am from Jamaica, right? Let me just start by saying that. And so I am more familiar with that territory. And so right now we're starting with just this one location, but we hope to over time expand to other locations in Jamaica, but also to other locations throughout the Caribbean.
How do you outreach to Jamaicans?
Well, right now, the way we are doing it is we're actually working with the physician. So the clinic at the University of the West Indies, it serves a large segment of the population because they don't have a lot of clinics, you know, spread throughout the island. So the main ones are actually in Kingston and Montego Bay. And the University of the West Indies is probably the main one in Kingston. So the oncologist there, right, she sees a lot of these women with breast cancer. So we don't reach out directly to the patients. We're actually doing this through the physician. So we send the medications to the hospital clinic, and then the physician decides which patients need it the most.
Karen, how do you handle this real challenge? I mean, your job as executive director is one which is extensive.
Yes.
How do you handle this challenge?
Definitely. Breast cancer, dealing with the breast cancer project in particular, you know, it's, you know, if we were to really put our arms around the problem, you know, as Dr. McLean said earlier, you know, there's only so much that we can do currently because it's a huge problem. But we are a young organization that has the resources to assist. You know, we have a board that is full of professionals who have expertise on many levels, from the legal, finance, health fields. And we really leverage their support, assistance, and guidance in helping to direct the organization. But we really try to focus, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel, which is partly why we partnered with the University of the West Indies Cancer Clinic. We know this oncologist in particular. She knows and sees the needs that are coming into her every day, and we are doing what we need to do to tap into those direct needs. So there's no ambiguity as far as the impact and the fact that we are making a meaningful impact difference in the lives of the patients who receive the no-cost chemotherapy treatment that we're offering. Because the other side of the coin, as far as these women not receiving this treatment, is kind of unspeakable. So we're happy to do it.
How can people in the United States and in Brooklyn help your organization and help people in Jamaica? There are many Jamaicans living here in Brooklyn.
Exactly. I mean, I don't know if you can feel the passion that comes from within. I too am of Jamaican descent, and most of our board members are as well, specifically the Caribbean region and Jamaica in particular. So we have, we are proud that we have, made our mark here in the States, but feel passionate about reaching back and really helping those who are in the region who continue to struggle and just don't have the resources that are available to us on a regular basis. The way that your viewers can assist us is really by, helping to support our organization. Literally it costs $2,500 for a full course of chemotherapy treatment per patient. And so that is a per patient cost, but we are open to any donation that people would like to give. It all adds up. Whatever people can do to support our organization, whatever denomination that may be, we would very much appreciate it, because we see firsthand the impact and literally the lives that are being saved by this treatment that's being offered. People can definitely go to our website, which is hhworldwide.org. And there's definitely places there where you can support and make direct support. We are, of course, a 501c3. We are a nonprofit organization, so all support is tax deductible.
Okay, thank you. Karen Nelson-Hughes, Executive Director of Healing Hands Worldwide, and Dr. Erole McClean, who is the founder of that organization. Thank you for being our guest on Brooklyn 45.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And to our viewers, we thank you for watching this program. On behalf of our Brooklyn 45 team, I am Sam Taitt.